The rain was coming down hard that November night, making the streets shine like mirrors under the streetlights. Maya had been working at the hospital for almost 6 years now, and she thought she'd seen everything. But tonight was different. The emergency room doors kept swinging open, bringing in more people who needed help. There had been a bad accident on the highway, and everyone was rushing around trying to help. Maya was good at her job. Really good. She never panicked, never got flustered, even when things got crazy. Her co-workers always said she had this calm energy about her, like nothing could shake her. But the truth was, Maya had learned to keep her feelings locked up tight. 2 years ago, someone she loved had walked away, and she'd decided it was easier to just focus on work. No complications, no heartbreak, just helping people and going home to her quiet apartment. She was checking on a patient when the paramedics brought him in. He was a firefighter, still wearing parts of his gear, his face covered in soot and ash. He'd been pulling people out of their cars when one of them caught fire, and he'd gotten burned trying to save them. Daniel was his name, though Maya didn't know that yet. She just saw another person who needed help, another job to do. But when she started cleaning his burns and checking to make sure he hadn't breathed in too much smoke, something strange happened. He looked up at her, and their eyes met for just a second. It wasn't anything dramatic or like the movies. It was just a moment, but it was enough to make her hands pause for just a heartbeat before she continued working. Daniel watched her work, noticing how gentle she was even though her movements were quick and sure. Most people in the emergency room were rushing around, shouting orders, looking stressed. But she was different. There was something peaceful about her, even in all this chaos. When she touched his arm to check his pulse, her hands were steady and warm. He found himself wanting to say something, anything, to make her look at him again. Maya finished treating his wounds and told him he was lucky. The burns weren't too serious and his lungs were clear. He'd need to come back for a checkup in a week, but he could go home tonight. She started to walk away, ready to help the next person, but she heard his voice behind her. "What's your name?" he asked. She turned around, surprised. Patients asked her name sometimes, but something about the way he said it made her hesitate. She could have just smiled and walked away. She probably should have. But instead, she heard herself say, "Maya." He smiled then, even though she could tell it hurt his face to do it. "Thank you, Maya." She nodded and walked away quickly, her heart beating faster than it should. She told herself it was just because the night had been busy and stressful. That's all it was. But for the rest of her shift, she kept thinking about his eyes and the way he'd said her name. She didn't even know his name, and she was annoyed at herself for caring. Daniel left the hospital that night with bandages on his arms and something else he hadn't expected. He couldn't stop thinking about the nurse with the kind eyes and gentle hands. He'd been so focused on work and taking care of his younger sister for the past 5 years that he'd forgotten what it felt like to notice someone like this. It scared him a little, but it also made him feel something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope, maybe, or possibility. As Maya drove home that morning after her shift ended, the rain had stopped and the sun was just starting to come up. She was tired like always, but something felt different. She kept seeing his face in her mind, kept hearing his voice. She shook her head and turned up the radio, trying to push the thoughts away. She didn't do this anymore. She didn't let people in. It was safer that way. But as she unlocked her apartment door and saw her empty living room, she wondered if safe was really what she wanted anymore. Maybe she was just tired of being alone. She pushed the thought away and went to bed, but sleep didn't come easily. She kept thinking about brown eyes and a voice that said her name like it meant something. 3 weeks went by, and Maya thought she'd forgotten about the firefighter with the kind smile. She was wrong. He came back to the hospital for his follow-up appointment, and even though she wasn't assigned to him, she saw him in the hallway. He saw her too, and waved. She waved back, feeling foolish for how happy that small gesture made her. Then he showed up again the next week. This time, He said he was there for a safety inspection that the fire department was doing. Maya saw him talking to the hospital administrator, but she also noticed how his eyes kept scanning the hallways, like he was looking for someone. When he finally spotted her, he smiled that same smile that made her heart do weird things. The third time he showed up, it wasn't even subtle anymore. He walked into the emergency room during her night shift, carrying a big box of coffee and donuts. "For the night crew," he announced. "You all work so hard, and I thought you could use something to keep you going." Maya's co-workers were thrilled, crowding around the break room table. But Maya hung back, watching Daniel from across the room. He was laughing with one of the other nurses, but then he looked up and caught her eye. He walked over, holding a cup of coffee. "I remembered you said you like it with just a little cream," he said, offering her the cup. "I never told you that," Maya said, surprised. "No, but I watched you make coffee in the break room last time I was here," he admitted, looking a bit embarrassed. "That's probably creepy, isn't it?" Maya took the coffee, trying not to smile. "A little bit. But thank you." They talked for just a few minutes before Maya had to get back to work, but those few minutes felt important somehow. He told her about his sister Sophia, who was 17 and giving him gray hairs by talking about college across the country. Maya told him about growing up in Portland, how she'd moved to Seattle for nursing school and never left. After that night, Daniel stopped pretending he had official reasons to visit the hospital. He'd just show up sometimes, usually around the time Maya's shift was ending, and they'd talk for a while. Sometimes it was just 5 minutes, sometimes it was half an hour. They talked about everything and nothing. Favorite foods, worst movies they'd ever seen, dreams they'd had as kids. Maya learned that Daniel had become Sophia's guardian when he was only 27, after their parents died in a car accident. He'd given up a lot to raise her, including a relationship that couldn't handle the sudden responsibility. He coached a youth soccer team on weekends because it made him feel like he was doing something good, something that mattered. Daniel discovered that Maya's mother had died of cancer when she was in college, and that watching her suffer had made Maya want to help people. She played piano, though she said she wasn't very good. She loved old bookstores and coffee shops and walking in the rain. She'd been engaged once, but her fiancé had left because he said she was married to her job. The way she said it, Daniel could tell it still hurt. December came with cold wind and heavy snow. One night, Maya's car wouldn't start after her shift. She was standing in the parking lot, frustrated and exhausted, when she heard a familiar voice. "Need a ride?" Daniel was parked a few spaces away, and Maya realized he'd been waiting for her. She should have felt uncomfortable about that, but instead she just felt grateful. She was too tired to take the bus, and it was too cold to wait for a taxi. His truck was warm and smelled like coffee and pine trees. They sat in her driveway, the engine running to keep the heat going, and talked. Really talked, in a way they hadn't before. He told her about the weight of raising a teenager alone, how he sometimes felt like he was failing Sophia even though he was trying his best, how he'd convinced himself he didn't have room in his life for anything but work and family. Maya told him the truth about her broken engagement, how her ex had said she was too much when she was emotional and not enough when he needed her, how she'd started believing that maybe she just wasn't meant for relationships, that she was better off alone. Daniel shifted in his seat to look at her better, and that's when it happened. He moved closer, reaching to adjust the heater, and suddenly Maya could feel his heartbeat. His shoulder pressed against hers, and through their jackets she could feel the steady rhythm of his heart. Neither of them moved away. "I don't think you're too much, or not enough," Daniel said quietly. "I think you're exactly right." Maya didn't know what to say to that. She just sat there, feeling his heartbeat, wondering when she'd stopped being so careful with her heart. Maya said yes to coffee, though it took Daniel 3 times of asking before she agreed. She told herself it was just coffee, just two people being friendly. Nothing more. But she also changed her outfit twice before leaving her apartment, and that told her everything she needed to know about her own feelings. They met at a small cafe near the market on her day off. Daniel was already there when she arrived, 2 cups of coffee on the table and a nervous smile on his face. He stood up when he saw her, and Maya thought it was sweet, the way he still did things like that. The conversation started a bit awkward, both of them trying too hard to be casual. But then Daniel said something funny about the time Sophia tried to cook him breakfast and nearly set the kitchen on fire, and Maya laughed, really laughed, and suddenly everything felt easy again. Coffee turned into walking through the market. They stopped at stalls selling flowers and fresh fish and handmade jewelry. Daniel bought her a small bouquet of winter flowers without asking, just handed them to her with a shy smile. Maya held them carefully, trying to remember the last time someone had bought her flowers. Walking turned into lunch at a small restaurant overlooking the water. They shared a pizza and talked about their childhoods, their favorite music, the places they dreamed of traveling someday. Daniel wanted to see Ireland, where his grandparents had come from. Maya wanted to go to Japan to see the cherry blossoms and the old temples. After lunch, they walked along the waterfront. The winter sun was getting low, painting the sky pink and orange. The water was gray and choppy, and ferry boats moved slowly across the bay. They walked close together, not quite touching, but aware of every inch of space between them. "I'm scared," Daniel said suddenly, stopping to look out at the water. Maya stopped too, surprised by his honesty. "Of what?" "Of this, of you, of caring about someone again." He turned to look at her, his eyes serious. "Everyone I've loved has left. My parents, my ex, even Sophia will leave for college soon. I told myself I was done letting people in. It's easier that way." Maya understood that feeling more than he knew. It is easier. Being alone is definitely easier. "But?" Daniel asked, hearing the unspoken word in her voice. "But easier isn't always better?" Maya surprised herself by saying it. She'd been thinking it for weeks, but hadn't admitted it out loud until now. "I've been playing it safe for 2 years. I go to work, I come home, I practice piano, I sleep. I'm not hurt, but I'm not really happy either." Daniel reached out and took her hand. His hand was warm and rough from work, and Maya's heart started beating faster. "So what do we do?" he asked. "I don't know," Maya admitted. "Try, maybe? See what happens?" He smiled then, that smile that made her feel like maybe taking a risk was worth it. "I can do try." They started dating after that, though neither of them used that word for weeks. Daniel would bring her soup after her long shifts, leaving it at the hospital reception with a note. Maya would send him funny pictures she found during her day, things she thought would make him laugh. They texted constantly, little messages about nothing important that somehow felt important anyway. Maya met Sophia officially one Sunday afternoon. Daniel had invited her over for dinner, and Maya was more nervous than she'd been in years. Sophia was protective of her brother, and Maya understood that. The girl had lost her parents and had only Daniel to rely on. Of course she'd be careful about anyone new in his life. Sophia was polite but distant, watching Maya carefully through dinner. Maya tried not to try too hard, answering questions honestly and not pretending to be someone she wasn't. When Sophia mentioned she was applying to colleges, Maya asked what she wanted to study. Sophia's eyes lit up talking about environmental science, and for just a moment, Maya saw the guard come down. After dinner, as Maya was leaving, Sophia walked her to the door while Daniel was in the kitchen. "He really likes you," Sophia said quietly. "Please don't hurt him." Maya looked at this teenage girl who'd had to grow up too fast, who was trying to protect the only family she had left. "I really like him too," Maya said honestly. "And I promise I'll try my best not to hurt him. That's all any of us can do, right? Try our best?" Sophia nodded slowly, and Maya saw something soften in her expression. It wasn't friendship yet, but maybe it was the beginning of understanding. Over the next few months, Maya and Daniel grew closer. They had their first real fight about something silly, and then made up and learned how to communicate better. Maya started keeping some of her things at his place. Daniel learned her schedule and would show up with coffee on her hardest days. Sophia started texting Maya sometimes, just little things about school or asking advice about college essays. Maya felt herself falling in love, and it terrified her. She kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for something to go wrong. But Daniel was patient with her fears, never pushing, always steady. And slowly, Maya started to believe that maybe this time could be different. Everything changed on a Tuesday in March. Daniel's fire station got called to a warehouse fire, and what should have been routine became dangerous fast. The building was older than anyone had realized, and the structure wasn't stable. Daniel and his team went in to make sure no one was inside, and that's when part of the roof collapsed. Daniel got out, but his friend Kevin didn't. Not right away. Daniel went back in, helping to pull Kevin out, but Kevin was hurt badly. Broken bones, burns, smoke in his lungs. He'd be okay eventually, but it was bad, really bad. Maya was at work when she heard. One of the paramedics mentioned the warehouse fire and the injured firefighter, and her blood went cold. She called Daniel immediately, her hands shaking so hard she could barely hold the phone. He answered, his voice rough from smoke, and told her he was fine. Just some cuts and bruises, nothing serious. But he wasn't fine. Not really. Maya could hear it in his voice, see it in his eyes when he finally came to see her 2 days later. He was pulling away, building walls up so fast she could practically see them going up brick by brick. "I can't do this," he said one night when she asked him what was wrong. They were sitting in his living room, Sophia upstairs doing homework. "I can't keep loving people and risking losing them, or worse, leaving them alone if something happens to me." "Nothing happened to you," Maya said, trying to keep her voice calm even though panic was rising in her chest. "You're okay. Kevin's going to be okay." "This time," Daniel said. "But what about next time? What if I don't come home one day? What happens to Sophia? What happens to you? I can't do that to people I love." "So you're just going to push everyone away?" Maya's voice cracked. "That's your solution?" "It's better than the alternative," Daniel said, and he wouldn't look at her. Maya felt something break inside her chest. "Better for who? Because it doesn't feel better for me." They didn't yell. Maybe it would have been easier if they had. Instead, they just talked in quiet, hurt voices until there was nothing left to say. Maya left that night with tears in her eyes, and Daniel let her go. For 2 weeks, they didn't talk. Maya threw herself into work, picking up every extra shift she could. If she was busy enough, tired enough, maybe she wouldn't think about him. It didn't work. She saw him everywhere. In the coffee shop they used to go to, in the park where they'd walked, in the smile of every patient who thanked her for her care. Daniel wasn't doing any better. He focused on Sophia, on work, on anything that would keep his mind busy. But Sophia noticed. Of course she noticed. She'd been watching her brother be alone for 5 years, and she'd finally seen him happy with Maya. Now he was miserable again, and it made her angry. "You're an idiot," Sophia told him one night over dinner. "Excuse me?" Daniel looked up, surprised. "You pushed her away because you're scared. I get it, I do. Losing people is terrible. But Daniel, we already lost Mom and Dad. We can't just stop living because we're afraid of losing more people. That's not living. That's just existing." "You don't understand," Daniel started, but Sophia cut him off. "I understand more than you think. You know what I'm scared of? Going to college and leaving you alone. But I have to do it anyway because that's life. We take risks because the alternative is being alone forever. And that's worse than anything." Daniel stared at his little sister, who suddenly didn't seem so little anymore. When had she gotten so wise? "She makes you happy," Sophia said more quietly. "I've never seen you as happy as you've been these past months. Don't throw that away because you're scared. Mom and Dad wouldn't want that for you." That night, Daniel lay awake thinking about Maya. About her laugh, her kindness, the way she made him feel like maybe he could have more in life than just responsibility and fear. Sophia was right. He'd been an idiot. Maya was working a late shift when the call came in about another fire. Multiple people injured, ambulances on the way. Her heart stopped when she heard it was Daniel's station. She stood frozen in the hallway, unable to breathe, until she saw the first stretcher come through the doors. And there he was. Not on the stretcher, but pushing it, bringing in a patient. He was covered in soot and ash, his uniform dirty, but he was alive and whole. Their eyes met across the chaos of the emergency room, and everything else disappeared. Maya stood there in the middle of the emergency room, people rushing around her, but all she could see was Daniel. He was alive. He was okay. All the walls she'd built up over the past 2 weeks came crashing down, and she realized she was shaking. Daniel handed off his patient to another nurse and walked toward her. He looked exhausted, like he'd been carrying something heavy for too long. Maya wanted to run to him, but her feet wouldn't move. She'd been so hurt by his leaving, so angry at how easily he'd pushed her away. But seeing him now, seeing that he was safe, nothing else seemed to matter. "Maya," he said, and just the way he said her name made her eyes fill with tears. "You're okay," she whispered. "I'm okay," he confirmed. "Can we talk? I know you're working, but please, just for a minute?" Maya nodded and led him to a small supply room where they could have privacy. She closed the door behind them and turned to face him. Her arms crossed over her chest like she was protecting herself, because she was protecting herself. She couldn't go through losing him again. Daniel didn't waste time with small talk. He crossed the small space between them until he was standing right in front of her, close enough that she could smell smoke on his clothes, close enough that she could see the regret in his eyes, close enough that when he took a deep breath, she could feel his heartbeat through the space between them. "I've been an idiot," he said, "the biggest idiot in the world." "Yes, you have," Maya agreed, not ready to make this easy for him. "I was scared," Daniel continued. "I still am scared. Tonight when we got the call about this fire, all I could think about was Kevin, about how close we came to losing him, about how Sophia would handle it if something happened to me. And then I thought about you and how you'd feel, and I convinced myself I was doing the right thing by staying away." "That's not your choice to make," Maya said, her voice stronger now. "You don't get to decide what I can or can't handle. You don't protect people by pushing them away." "I know that now. Sophia told me the same thing. She called me an idiot too, if that makes you feel any better." Daniel tried to smile, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "But it wasn't until tonight, until I was actually in danger again, that I realized something." "What?" Maya asked quietly. "That being safe and alone is worse than taking a risk with you, that I'd rather have whatever time we get together, even if it scares me, than spend the rest of my life wondering what if." He reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and gently touched her face. "I don't want to be scared anymore, Maya. I want to be with you." Maya felt the tears spill over then. "You hurt me. When you left, when you shut me out, it hurt. I know. And I'm so sorry. I'm sorry for being a coward, for not fighting harder for us, for making you feel like you weren't worth the risk when you're worth everything." His thumb brushed away her tears. "I can't promise I won't get scared again. I can't promise something won't happen at work that makes me want to wrap you in bubble wrap and keep you safe from feeling any pain. But I can promise I'll try. I'll try to be brave enough for both of us until you feel ready to be brave again, too." Maya looked up at him, seeing the sincerity in his eyes, feeling his heartbeat through the small space between them. Strong and steady and alive. "I'm scared, too," she admitted. "I'm terrified of losing someone I love again, of not being enough, of failing at this." "Then let's be scared together," Daniel said softly. "Let's be scared and try anyway." Maya thought about the past 2 weeks, how empty they'd felt, how she'd realized that her safe, careful life wasn't really living at all. She thought about Sophia's text from last week, just 3 words. "He misses you." She thought about how Daniel had shown up at the hospital tonight, alive and whole, and how her first thought hadn't been relief that she'd protected her heart by staying away. It had been joy that he was okay, followed immediately by grief that she couldn't run to him. She didn't want to live like that anymore, careful and safe and alone. "Okay," she whispered. "Let's try." Daniel pulled her into his arms then, holding her tight, and Maya wrapped her arms around him. She could feel his heartbeat against her chest, strong and steady. She could feel him breathing, alive and real. And she realized this was what she'd been missing. Not just him, but this. The feeling of being connected to someone, of taking a risk because the alternative was worse. They stood there for a long moment, just holding each other, before Maya pulled back slightly. "I have to get back to work." "I know," Daniel said, but he didn't let her go yet. "Can I see you tomorrow? When you're done with your shift?" "Yes," Maya said, smiling for the first time in 2 weeks. "But you have to promise me something. Anything. Promise me you'll talk to me when you're scared instead of running away. Promise me we'll figure things out together." "I promise," Daniel said, and kissed her forehead. Together. Maya went back to work with a lighter heart than she'd had in weeks. When her shift finally ended the next morning, Daniel was waiting in the parking lot like he'd promised. He took her to breakfast and they talked, really talked, about their fears and hopes and what they wanted their future to look like. Over the next few months, things weren't perfect. Daniel still got nervous before every shift, and Maya still had moments of doubt. But they talked through it. They learned to trust each other with their fears instead of running from them. Sophia got accepted to her dream school, and she asked Maya to come with them when they toured the campus. Maya watched Daniel try not to cry as they walked around the university, and she held his hand, silently promising she'd be there to help him through it. One quiet evening in June, Maya was at Daniel's house playing the piano. She'd been practicing a new song, and Sophia was supposed to be doing homework, but was actually just listening. Daniel sat down on the piano bench beside her, and Maya leaned back against him without missing a note. She could feel his heartbeat against her back, strong and steady and alive, and she realized this was home, not the place, but this feeling, this person, this life they were building together from their broken pieces. When she finished playing, Sophia clapped and went upstairs to actually do her homework. Daniel wrapped his arms around Maya from behind and rested his chin on her shoulder. "I love you," he said quietly. "I should have said it weeks ago, but I was still being a coward. I love you, Maya." Maya turned on the bench to face him, her hands coming up to rest on his chest, where she could feel his heartbeat under her palms. "I love you too, even when you're being an idiot." Daniel laughed, and the sound filled the room with warmth. "Especially when I'm being an idiot," he corrected. "Especially then," Maya agreed, and kissed him. Outside, the summer sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Inside, 2 people who'd been afraid to take a risk sat together at a piano, their hearts beating in rhythm, finally understanding that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let someone in. Sometimes being scared together is better than being safe alone. And sometimes, when you move close enough to feel someone's heartbeat, You realize you found exactly where you're supposed to be.